Welcome to Season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show, a deep dive into the heart and soul of leadership, where we spotlight visionary leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, innovative executives, and New Earth pioneers who have all done the inner work and soul searching to transform and step into their greater calling and mission, here to make a big impact for collective good. We will share and explore vulnerable insights and potent wisdom in our heart-centered dialogues, so you too can be equipped for the future paradigm unfolding today. Be empowered with the skills, tools, and practices so you too can do the transformative work and be the ascending leader you came here to be. Together, let's bring more heart and soul back to leadership around the world. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to a special episode and edition of the Vulnerable Power Show. Kind of a in-between seasons, in between the fourth season, which we finished up last year, and the upcoming fifth season, which will be in 2025. And this episode is a very special one, not only in terms of the format, where it'll only be me solo. It's also about a topic about how literally embodiment saved my life. And we're going to explore this topic of embodiment through the lens of leadership skills and how this deeper awareness that I gained and the vital skills that I learned around embodiment not only helped save my life, literally, they also propelled me into this, let's say, being able to be future fit, this new way of leading and being. So truly, as we've talked about on the show through the 4 years, I can't believe the time has flown so much. And as every year passes, this fifth year going on next year, we see the data in the workforces and ecosystems around the world getting worse and worse in terms of disengagement, disconnect, burnout, and really a, pardon my French, crappy time all around. So I wanted to dive in right away today, and we're going to pepper in these techniques, and I'm going to really walk you through an experiential format today, as we have been doing the last couple seasons of this show. And if you're new, welcome, welcome. So there is truly this ancient saying, shall I say, and it truly comes from the Taoist principle or more of the Asian schools, which says that a wise person lives in their feet, And for me, if you remember nothing else, this is a great epitomization or a great way of putting in a nutshell what embodiment looks like, at least through my lens and my perspective and understanding. So a wise person lives in their feet. And in a really simplistic way, I'm going to do a quick demonstration or show you what I mean visually, as I often do when I teach this one-on-one or group settings and different trainings and whatnot off of this platform. So we have our, let's say, energetic body over here. And for many of us leaders and people around the world, we have our physical body. And for many of us, unfortunately, we're living with, let's say, our soul or energetic body out of our physical body, which is what is oftentimes referred to as disassociation or feeling disconnected. So the statement of a wise person lives in their feet, what is meant by that is that you bring in this energetic body, you bring your actual energetic presence, the fullness of your soul into your physical body, and you're really fully here. And it's going from disconnected, disassociated to really feeling deeply connected, fully embodied, and deeply present, or a more harmonious state. So there's a lot that we're going to cover today. So if nothing else, remember that this notion of really today, we're going to cover how do you come back more fully? How do you really come into this physical vessel, this transient home of ours that we've talked about so many different ways on the 4 years on this show. So, this also dovetails inner work. Really, I see embodiment, and it was for me, and I don't know if it resonates for those of you listening today. For me, embodiment work was really hand in hand with the inner work, because as I started to become more embodied, and I'll talk about today how it literally saved my life. I learned that I was living and operating in an unnatural way, industrialization, all sorts of things that happen in society. And you've heard various anecdotes and experiences of various leaders, so many leaders already around the world that we've had on the show that have shared vulnerably in their power, their journey, and how they stepped into disease. So you really learn, as I came to learn, that you're coming out of this survival state, this old way of being, and many of us don't even know we're in this state or we're disconnected because it's so normal, and many of us are taught or conditioned that this is okay to be this way, and you're shifting when you're embodied into a harmonious state. And so embodiment and inner work are really linked because you start to realize that you've been living on autopilot, conditioning, all sorts of childhood experiences, all sorts of various things that have shaped us living in an unintentional and unconscious way. And the only thing that actually allows us to do the inner work is embodiment, is this ability to actually churn inwards. So it's actually, for me, a necessary component, a vital variable, and especially to successfully integrate any of the inner work you do, whether you look at it through the lens of healing or simply transformational inner work. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start us off in a very experiential tone by asking you to take a moment, if you're new to any of this, or let's say you're a seasoned practitioner or a fellow teacher, wherever you're at joining us today, I want you to take a moment, as I do it with you, to really feel into your body, and take a moment to put your feet on the ground if you're seated. Feel your, let's say, buttocks or your back if you're on a chair, or if you're lying down, whatever that looks like for you. Take a moment to close your eyes, especially if you're a beginner. I still do it, and I've been doing this for thousands of hours and almost a decade now, full time. So really close your eyes, turn inwards. Embodiment really invites us to actually go into the body and bring more of our awareness and attention, so we're going to talk about throughout this episode, into the body. So take a moment. Feel into your body. What can you feel? And what can you not feel? When I first started this type of work, whether it be inner work or embodiment work, and didn't realize how bad I was, and we're going to cover a lot of that today, my own personal experiences with embodiment and this inner work, and how it literally led me to save my life. It's hard because you're asked, what do you feel? And you go, well, what do you mean? What do I feel? So I'm going to elaborate by what do I mean by noticing what you're feeling. That could be sensations. That could literally be, oh, I noticed that there's some stiffness in my groin area in my left hip. Or it could be butterflies of anxiety in your chest. Any sensations, any feelings, anything that is more of a body-oriented feeling or sensation, notice that. And if there's a difficulty noticing that, or if there's parts of you that are numb, that's okay too. Notice that as well. As we're going to talk about in terms of the keys to embodiment and different elements, the breath always helps me. There's no right or wrong. Taking another moment or two to engage in words and seeing what you notice, what you feel, what sensations you can really bring your awareness, attention, and inner gaze to. And opening your eyes. And so what did you notice? What didn't you notice? And I know this is tricky, as I said, as I was guiding us on this initial noticing exercise or practice, because truly, so when I started this, as I said, it was, these prompts were difficult in terms of they sounded esoteric. We're not trained to do this, what we're going to cover in this episode. And even more so, it oftentimes requires guidance, because when you're numb, when you're disassociated, when you're disconnected, how can you tell that you're numb, disassociated, or disconnected? It's normal. So you're not even going to sense that there's a problem. So what did you notice? What did you take a moment to really maybe make a mental note, if you want to jot anything down, if you want to pause the actual episode, take a moment, because that helps you set a threshold. So we're going to talk about at the throughout the episode, you're going to start to see themes. And one of the big themes is radical responsibility or radical candor. You really start to ask yourself, and you really have to be very honest with yourself more than you ever have been, because we can oftentimes fool ourselves or intellectualize or mentalize it. So it's really tricky. It's difficult, and it's really, it requires patience to do this work. So wherever you're at with that noticing exercise, let me share with you where I was early in my journey. And, I'm not going to take too long. This may be a shorter episode because we've heard so many anecdotes throughout the 4 years and first 4 seasons already of the dark night of the soul, the dis-ease that many leaders around the world enter into when they're disembodied, when they don't have the skills such as embodiment that we're covering today, and when they're living in a survival state or in an unnatural way. So for me, there's a few things that really stood out on this journey. And, unfortunately, I lost my brother, as many of you have heard on the show as I've talked about it, and was the, let's say, precipice for my sabbatical and a lot of this inner work and a lot of this learning of embodiment. It really started with me early in my journey going to different practitioners. And one of the people that guided me on my own inner work, embodiment, and more, let's call it healing and self-mastery journey, was a more shamanic practitioner, more, let's say, energy-oriented practitioner. And this teacher of mine had me literally go through a process merely through dialogue of going back through my childhood experiences. And, I believe it was the first or second session. She paused me and she said to me, Haas, do you notice I've asked you about your feelings around various situations from your childhood? And here you are, every time you create a new anecdote, I move you a chair. And she showed me, she'd moved me 5 different times. There were 5 different versions of the narrative, 5 different personas, or 5 different ways I had disconnected or taken a step away from what was actually happening in my body, what was actually happening in my lived experience. And it was very startling because I literally caught myself, and it was a very big wake-up call, which I'm hoping this episode, much like all of our episodes, inspires you and empowers you and encourages you to see wherever you're at in your journey that you can do this work, because I'm giving you examples right now of how far gone I was. And if I can do it, I oftentimes joke with my clients and with people I teach, and here you are, you're basically learning from me. And that if I can do it as a crash test dummy, as God's crash test dummy, you can do it, because that experience showed me how many of the childhood imprints and suppressions and ways we suppress, hide, tuck it away, disconnect, disassociate, not feel or avoid or ignore, whatever word that characterizes that mechanism. And it showed me, wow, I'm living on autopilot. Wow, I'm really not feeling. So I don't know what your experience is with that. Is there anything similar for you? Where are you at with your healing journey? Taking another moment to reflect and offer you another prompt as I pepper in these personal anecdotes. Do you relate to any of that? Is there similar for you? Is there any way you can look back and go, is there anything in my early childhood, early life experiences that I haven't really fully felt and that I may be carrying with me? And all of these things we carry really like weights and baggage, and they lend themselves to so many things we're going to cover in terms of the impact they have, which we'll cover in a couple moments. So I was also, as I said, the survival state word. I was also living in a very hyper vigilant. That's a fancy nervous system word. And we've come a long way in the last 2 decades. A lot of the science and spiritual sciences we cover on the show rotate around nervous system, trauma informed, various different modalities and integrative perspectives. So I was living in this, let's say, fight or flight, always doing, always on, very adrenaline, junkie kind of orientation. And I didn't notice it. In fact, being a former corporate litigator, type A, didn't help. I was successful, I was a high achiever. So society also tells us this is the way to be. This is the way to be. Live like this. This is okay. And that takes you further and further out of embodiment, further and further into perpetual and chronic anxious, stressed states, as I was. Can you relate to that at all? Is there any truth or radical responsibility you can bring right now listening to this? Any further ways you can see how maybe you're living in, let's say, a constricted or tight way? And Another personal experience early in the show, first season, we had 3 episodes with a very world famous body worker and family friend, Tanya. And when I first met Tanya, I was sitting in a movie theater with her. You can check out her episode the first time she was on the show. We talk about this. And I wanted to highlight this for a moment and talk about how when a very powerful body worker who's trained in both the formal scientific as well as the esoteric and Eastern and energetic arts was sitting next to me and was sensing, because we can sense other people's pain and we can sense other people's dis-ease and dysregulation, especially if they were how bad I was. And I was in a very tight, constricted state, so many accidents, so many different things and traumas and things I was carrying, as I said. And here I was thinking I was fine. And she turned to me and said, do you have headaches? Are you in pain? Because I'm sensing from you that you may be. And I said, well, no, I feel great. I feel fine. Some of you who have seen that episode will see, that when we share this, she told you candidly that I worked with her and all of this. And so I came to realize that we carry so many constrictions, so many ways that our mind is tight, is blocked, is disconnected from reality. And it also blocks us from the heart, and our emotions are blocked up and congested. And then we carry all that in our bodies. We literally are tight, and over time we get worse, 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 and worse. And that's what we're learning more and more these days. So are there any chronic symptoms you're dealing with? Are there any ways that you can see and relate to these personal anecdotes that I've peppered in early on already that not only can you relate to, that can maybe bring you a reflective opportunity, shall I say, to go deeper in and say, what more room do I have for embodiment? And there's always a why. There's always a why. Why should you care? Why should you do it? And what impact does this actually have on your leadership? So for so many of us now, we're hearing this word burnout, and it's everywhere right now. It's actually a formal epidemic, according to the world organizations. And every burnout risk, every chronic disease risk comes from this not being present in the body, not even fully feeling the body. And we go on autopilot until we burn out because we have no actual attention or connection to the body, to the mind, to the heart, to the vessel, to the energy, inner energy systems that are very real. And these 4 systems of the mind, the heart, the body, and the energy systems get out of whack. As I said, we live in disharmony and unnatural ways, and you literally will burn out before you know it if you're not embodied. So it's very important to make sure that your well-being is intact and that you can self-regulate. Okay. Those that don't have embodiment, like myself in the past, have poor resilience, have low capacity, because you don't even process any of the stuff you've been carrying. You don't develop these very important muscles. Embodiment is almost like a muscle, develops these inner awarenesses, these interoceptions and different inner perceptions and subtle awarenesses. And so you never develop them, you never get training, you never develop any grit or capacity. So we live in this very fragile and very easily triggered state because we're not embodied. Let's not even get started on how low my EQ, my emotional quotient, my poor relationships, because I was a hot mess. I was reactive because I had so much stuff stored. I was so disconnected and disassociated. And this is prevalent across the world, both in the private and public sector, all over different ecosystems. And I'm sure many of you listening to this can relate more and more, or maybe you're seeing more and more aspects of how this applies to you. So lastly, very big impact. You're not going to have any real breakthroughs because, as I've already said, embodiment and inner work go hand in hand, and you won't really integrate any of the inner work. Let's say you've been on this path for a long time and nothing really sticks. This is especially true for those of you that applies to, because you'll oftentimes find, oh, you've done all the work up here at an intellectual level, or you haven't really fully brought it in at a visceral level and actually had everything click and integrated. So you oftentimes see that embodiment brings higher self-awareness and higher sustainable integration, and you really see big breakthroughs and a lot of sustainable results. So I don't know about you. I wish I'd known this stuff sooner. And I'm curious, is there any impact that you see? Taking another moment, maybe pause and take a moment. Is there any impact Anyway, if I begin to practice what Haas is going to show me in this episode, and we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts in a couple moments of how do you do it if you're new, and even if you're seasoned practitioner, as I've said, how to deepen this embodiment and take it to a whole nother level, a deeper level of embodiment and deeper level of embodied higher awareness. So what would be possible? I'm going to invite you into this prompt. What would be possible if you applied more of this to your leadership and to your life? What do you feel? What do you think? What do you sense? What do you imagine would be possible? Because I had no idea myself. I wish somebody had told me as I'm offering it into your life and into your field of consciousness now. So we dive deeper. The crux of this and the biggest key of all of this is feeling your actual feelings. Feeling your actual feelings. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. And why is that important? Well, as I've said, culture, society, training, you name it, everything kind of converges. And we live in a way where we're always on, we're always in doing mode, we're always active. We're not really ever pausing to actually process, to get embodied, and to actually feel everything and to see what it is we've been carrying all along. So when I say feeling your feelings, I mean actually feeling your feelings. I'm going to ask you, how do you feel right now? How do you feel right now? Let's take another moment. How do you feel right now? How do you feel right now? And spoiler alert, if you're already answering with a good, okay, fine, all right, they're not emotions. They're not emotions. They're nowhere to be found on this thing called the emotional wheel. They're emotional bypass. And that's the big key here of feeling your feelings. So for me, when you would first ask me, I would say good, fine, okay, as Tanya did. As I said, one of those personal anecdotes. And I was in horrible constriction, biophysical pain, dis-ease, you name it. 9 years to undo a lot of that. Almost 8, excuse me. And so how are you feeling right now? I'm feeling, so when I first started this, I would be numb. I couldn't really answer. I'd do these cop outs, these emotional bypass words. Okay, fine, great. I'm all right. So now I can actually, having done this inner work, having done more embodiment practice, having developed this embodied presence, I can actually go, I feel centered, I feel calm. I feel this subtle excitement that's very embodied. How do you feel right now? How do you feel right now? Take a moment. How do you feel? How do I feel right now? It's all another clear sign, other than using those bypass words that we use in society. Again, look, I mean, think about this for a moment, not only in terms of how do you feel, or take a moment to pause and reflect, excuse me, not think. So I'm going to get to the thinking word in a moment. Reflect on a moment. How often do you walk by somebody, your loved one, your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, your partner, your work partner, co-founder, let's say, or teammate? How are you doing, John? I'm fine. I'm okay. We have habituated to living at a very surface level, which is why so many of us are conditioned to be disembodied and think it's okay. We don't know any better. Nobody has actually paused us and gone, hey, Haas, that's what I'm doing now. Hey, you, listener, how are you feeling right now? And there's a clear sign that you're not actually feeling as fully, at least as you could, if you're using thinking words. I think I'm feeling this, or you're thinking about the feeling versus actually feeling it fully. That's also another clear sign, other than good, okay, and these emotional bypass words, that you're starting with thinking phraseology instead of feeling. I feel centered. I feel calm. I feel anxious. I feel nervous. So as I said, it's about being real with yourself. It's about being very real with yourself, applying radical candor, radical responsibility, and no longer BSing yourself and saying, hey, this is what really is, not what I think is, not this mental construct of my life, and I'm living all up in my head. And as they said, you live in your head, you're dead. It's another good, catchy cliche for embodiment and the essence of it, because you actually are, no, I'm not okay. I'm actually in deep pain. I have a lot of emotional traumas and wounds. I fell off a balcony when I was 2 months old. That also stayed in my physical pain body. All these practitioners were picking up, and it took me a very long time. And we're going to get to, when I finish the episode, we're going to talk about the tips of how you got to be gentle. And I'm going to pepper it in right now and foreshadow it, so to speak. It's going to be very difficult.
It's almost like a 2 steps forward, 5 steps back kind of a process, as much of this inner work is. Because so many of us have been conditioned to living in what we think is, not having our actual attention, our actual awareness, our actual concentration here. Now that we're all thinking we're good and we're not stopping to actually get into the feeling, get into the sensing, get into everything below the neck. Okay. So if you're feeling like, oh man, that's me, you're not alone. As you've heard on this episode, we have quite a few exemplars, and that's very much the basis of the show, right? To show you exemplars, shining examples that we spotlight here, people that made it through, especially the first couple seasons. That was very much the dark night journey, all of the grit, the blood, sweat, and tears. And a lot of that, if we go through it, carry different principles that I'm going to cover now that I would say are skills that tie into or elements of embodiment, that are elements of embodiment. And really, they help you come back home to this body. They come back home to this body, restore this natural flow, restore the natural energies. And so embodiment brings healing, embodiment brings presence, embodiment brings breakthroughs, embodiment brings integration, embodiment brings a up level in the performance, impact, and fulfillment of leaders that do the work and invest in it. So one of the big skills, and we've covered it on this show, is breath. And breath is a anchor for me. It's so important. It's taught this way, especially when you learn embodiment practices. I have it tattooed on my wrist, for instance. Early in my practice, I learned breath was going to help me be literally an anchor to come back to the body, to still, to center, to arrive. You can go through various modalities around the world, from modern mindfulness all the way to the ancient techniques of Vipassana and other practices that are thousands of years old that actually show us, hey, breath is a very simple and very powerful way of coming back home to the body, restoring that natural flow, and bringing the embodiment online, that embodied presence. So breath, very vital, very powerful work, or very powerful tool, shall I say. Another, let's say, skill or element of embodiment is grounding. Grounding, that quote we started with, a wise person lives in their feet. That's an actual, let's say, way of describing grounding. Grounding of actually bringing yourself down, grounding towards the earth to literally drop into the body, feel yourself more fully, and to, some call it earthing, to actually root down into the earth. There's a lot of research. You can Google earthing, literally earth, ing as a verb, and you'll see, or grounding, you'll see tons of scientific research out there on this and the impacts it has. Now, here we're going to highlight that the impact we're focusing on, or how it ties into embodiment, is one element of when you're embodying or you want to get embodied, you can ground. You can literally ground your energetic body back into your physical body, and then you can take it one step further and ground into the earth and root into the earth. Very important element or aspect that ties into this. Okay. Another very vital thing that I had no idea about, and it was talked about in the ancient times. Now scientists are creating all sorts of terminology for it. I said it a bit ago, interoception, which means your inner perception, your capacity or your faculty to actually observe and perceive your inner landscape. Well, these subtle perceptions, I had no idea were a thing. And they're right under our proverbial noses. And it's the capacity to actually turn inwards and sense the subtle spectrum, or the subtle, let's say, realm that we're dealing with. And when I first started, my perception was very limited. I could only sense gross or very, let's say, big things, swaths of my body. Oh, I can feel my trunk. Then over time, you develop more interoception, you develop more of these inner senses and subtle capacities, and you suddenly realize, whoa, I can feel like my inner hip. I can feel subtle emotions. I can start to distinguish different emotions. So the subtle perception is an element or aspect of this as well, okay? And then lastly, as far as skills or things that tie in, is movement, right? Truly being able to move energy, move our body, and or however you look at it, whether it be the physical movement, or as I talk about it, and or the energetic movement, of allowing fluidity and allowing the flow. That is very important for embodiment work. In fact, when you start to do embodiment work and this inner work and you come back to your body, you'll start to realize, at least I did, how rigid you are. And then you start to realize, oh, I need to move more. So movement is very vital. So breath, grounding, subtle perception, movement, these four, let's say, pillars or tools that I sense will be aspects that you want to individually develop, right? That go into this whole cake or this whole meal of embodiment, the whole puzzle pieces of breath, grounding, subtle perception, and movement, allowing you. And there's others more wanting to highlight, but I would say these big four pillars, okay? So taking a moment to check in on that, make any mental notes or physical notes that you want. And I want to guide us through a practice now. I want to guide us through a practice now of actually going deeper into using these skills, integrating them, weaving them together, almost akin to a guided meditation or an active meditation. And before we do that, I want you to take a moment and again, tune into how do you feel before we actually start this guided practice. And on a scale of 1 to 10, checking in on a quantified scale, 1 being I feel meh, crummy, 10 being I feel wired, etc. Maybe as this episode's gone on, you've gotten more, let's say, amped, or maybe you haven't. I assume you have. A lot of my clients and people I teach tend to say that I bring a high vibe. So point being, take a moment to notice how you feel. Scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to give myself, I feel like about a 7.5 or an 8 as this episode has gone on. I fluctuate between a 7 and a 9. I'd say, I'm kind of like waning a bit, and that's okay because sometimes we get in our heads. And again, this is a live example of what embodiment has brought me. I'm able to tune in and go, oh, that's because I'm in my head. Let me drop in. Let me kind of tune in and then bring that energy vibration back up. Embodiment is very vital. I'm demonstrating it live. So how do you feel? Scale of 1 to 10. Take a moment, maybe jot down the number before we begin. And then I want you to churn inwards. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to churn inwards. And I want you to get in a comfortable position. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. This isn't going to be a very complicated process, very simple practice we're going to weave in together. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take a moment to open to the here and now, open to whatever is arising in your mind, to your heart, your body, opening to my voice, opening to this practice, literally opening in every way that feels appropriate for you. Opening to the here and now, taking a moment more and more. And then I want you to center and arrive more and more in your body, noticing if there's any energy in your head. I want you to see if you can center and drop all that energy down and center and arrive more and more into your body. I want you to literally take your hands and put them on your torso now. Maybe you want to put one hand physically on your heart, one hand on your stomach, or maybe both of them generally on your torso. Whatever helps to anchor you more and more into your body, arriving, centering, and opening more and more. I want you to turn your awareness into your breath. As you breathe, using your nostrils, if you're not already, I want you to use your diaphragm. Fill your belly on your inhale, exhale. Let your stomach contract. Not using the upper chest, using more of the lower diaphragm and the lower abdomen, the lower lungs. Taking more and more time to open, center, and arrive with your hands on your torso, turning your awareness more and more to your breath. Noticing your breath, bring your awareness, attention, and focus to your breath. Allowing your intention to more and more be to embody your presence more and more. And if it helps, you can literally say, I call all parts of me back to me now. I call all parts of me back to me now. And as you say those words, actually feel all of your presence coming back to you more and more. Maybe you have attention spread out from the day or from prior experiences or thoughts or emotions about the future. Opening, centering, and arriving more and more, your breath anchoring you into your body, noticing your inhales and your exhales, the physical sensations of the breath. You can rub your chest and say, "This is me. I am safe. It's safe to be here now." I invite you to say these words out loud. "This is me. I am safe. It's okay to be here now." And as you breathe, see if you can bring more and more of your literal mind and mental awareness into your body, more and more of your awareness, attention, and focus and intention into your body, where your hands are, where your breath and your mechanical functions of the breath are. Inhale, noticing more and more. What are you noticing as this practice deepens? Are you able to feel more and more into your body? If not, that's okay. And if so, great. Are you able to sense and feel your emotions more? Allowing whatever is happening as more and more granularity, more and more of this inner perception deepens with this practice. Inhale, more and more dropping in. Take another inhale and exhale. And then taking a moment to ground even more, and maybe taking your hands off your chest, wiggling your fingers, opening your eyes, gently coming back to the room, bringing that embodiment into the present moment more and more. Hopefully, that was an interesting experience, an exercise, an experiment or practice for you. If you're a beginner, especially if you're advanced as well, it can equally be powerful in different ways. For instance, those commands I invited you into, "This is me, I'm safe," rubbing your chest. When I learned that about 7 years ago, I cried in a very simple meditation practice, because oftentimes we don't even give ourselves permission to be embodied, to be here, and to feel fully. So, did you notice any shifts? Where are you now on the scale of 1 to 10? Taking a moment to feel in, how do I feel? What am I noticing? Are there any shifts? If you, from your first score to now, I feel more relaxed, more calm, more at an even 8. I don't feel too hyper, and I don't feel down or drained or waning is the word I used earlier. And did you have any discomfort equally? So were there any pleasant sensations, and then were any discomfort? Was there any discomfort? Because it truly is a practice and a process. And when I first started this, I came to learn that I actually was uncomfortable being comfortably calm. In other words, I was so used to being in a not calm or unnatural or disharmonious state that when I actually did some of these practices for the first time, I felt weird or unnatural because calm was such a foreign thing for me. So, what did you notice? Any shifts and any discomfort? And make notes of that. It's a practice. It's going to take time to develop. It's going to take time to dig and excavate and go deeper and deeper and develop that subtle perception, develop that capacity to develop that enhanced ability. And I'm curious, if you're honest with yourself, that radical candor, that radical responsibility, because this is all a new way of being, a new way of leading. One of the cornerstones of this show is to show you these leading edge tools. And that's why embodiment oftentimes overlooked, oftentimes missing from the, let's say, spirituality ascension movement. And it's shifting out of this unnatural, industrialized, old way, let's say, of being. And it's regaining our driver's seat, becoming conscious, becoming fully aware, attention, focus, intention in the body, here now, as much as possible. So we're not driven unconsciously. We're bringing more soul back to the leadership. We're bringing more soul back into our lives. We're literally coming back into our bodies and embodying that soul. And so much, as I said, is impacted. And when I started this journey, I was literally had necrosis, as many of you have heard on this show. I was in dis-ease. I was in such a bad state at mid 30s. And I was at the peak of my career. Everything was going great. I feel great. And literally, I had no idea what I was in store for, how much excavating, how much inner work, and then this embodiment work saved my life. Because if I hadn't caught it, I would have gotten worse and worse and more necrotic and worse. And my dis-ease and biofunctions, my mental distress, my emotional toxicity, all of it would have crumbled more and more and more than it already did. So this personal experience on this journey, I had to be patient with myself. As I said, sometimes it looks like you're going backwards. You may be like, oh, I suck. You may doubt if it's working at all. And you have to truly commit, keep going, and allow the process, or as I oftentimes say, the magic of these methodologies, of these practices, of these teachings and wisdom and skills only go as far as you allow and belief allow. So if you disbelief, you doubt, your mind's a powerful thing, our energy fields are a powerful thing, our consciousness is a powerful thing. And even if you're disassociated, you will still block your progress. So you want to have patience, you want to have grace, you want to, in those low moments, go, this is a process. How many years have you been living like that? And to regroove that and to live in an embodied way from disembodiment, from disengagement, from disassociation takes time, takes time. So you want to have that grace and be gentle on yourself. So what would it look like? What would it look like if you use some of these tools and wisdom teachings moving forward in your life? Let's take a moment. What would it look like for you? What do you imagine would be possible? And what more could you achieve? What more could you be? How much more fulfillment? How much more performance enhancement and optimization? How much more impact on your mission here to make the world a better place for collective impact? How much more would you bring in terms of fulfillment, performance, and impact? Take a moment. What would be possible for you if you applied these tools? And what are you willing to commit to? Let's take a moment, maybe pause the recording again and take a moment. What are you willing to commit to? What stood out for you on this episode? And what are you willing to commit to, both in terms of what would it look like in terms of imagining, and what action steps are you willing to implement? One or two things maybe that stood out. Maybe you want to come back and watch this episode again and do this practice again and again. Many of us, I'm going to, in a couple minute or so, read a very powerful quote. Many of us in this movement of spirituality, enlightenment, awakening, ascension, are trying to truly fly before we've learned to crawl, let alone stand, let alone walk, let alone run, let alone leap to fly. And we're getting burned. Not only because we're flying too close to the sun too fast, we don't have these foundational skills such as embodiment, which we've covered ad nauseum today, or at length today, excuse me. Hopefully you're not feeling nauseous. It's this notion of it's key. We need to do it. We can't we jump past it, and we certainly can't intellectualize or think our way out of it. All right. So what would it look like? What are you willing to commit to and implement? I invite you into that. And I trust that this episode, this content, the solo episode, the special episode that I felt inspired to do, brings you more insight, more of the practical know-how, and more encouragement and empowerment to take this on. So I wanted to really quickly read a quote that was brought to, it's more than a quote, something that was brought to my attention that really, for me, epitomizes the problems that we face and what embodiment can do and how embodiment can help us, not only in terms of saving our lives, in terms of supporting us on the journey of ascension and raising our vibration, both individually and collectively. So embodiment is the new enlightenment. This was written by somebody on Facebook named Takopa Turner. Much has been written about the art of mindfulness, especially focusing on how to create wiggle room between an event and our reaction to it. All of this is valid and important work that takes us deeper into the seat of the silent observer so that we'll be less governed by the unpredictable ebbs and swells of the emotional life. It can be a tremendous tool for moving through difficult passages with equanimity. Alas, more often than not, I see this practice creating a kind of disassociation or detachment from the true feeling in life, especially in folks who haven't done any of the hard and dirty inner work of integrating their shadow. For meditation can be used like any other form of escapism to circumvent the true encounter with our less than desirable inner and outer guests, these feelings and thoughts we don't really want to feel. The result of this type of presence often creates the opposite of what it intends, not fostering the oneness it exalts. Instead, it feeds the very separation we're trying to heal by creating an image of spirituality that is unattainable. So the focus should be on embodiment, which brings us closer to this messy business of being human. I love that, this messy business of being human. And if you're doing it right, she says, presence, it doesn't detach you, it sensitizes you to the environment. It puts you smack dab in the discomfort, the disagreeability, the pain, the awkwardness, and the contradiction. This is where you can grow more skilled at meeting life where it's at instead of how you'd prefer it to be. In other words, allowing the full spectrum of events to be included in your experience instead of mounting resistance to them. So this allows us to be more present with life's mystery or the ongoing wow of now. So I pulled this because I really felt this sums up everything I've covered in the episode. And to me, not only what we've covered in this episode, some of what the pitfalls of not really doing embodiment the right way in a true, authentic way and using it as another vehicle. So I trust that this episode has been useful for you, a special format, and really looking forward to this upcoming season of the Vulnerable Power Show, the 5th season, the 5th year, coming up in 2025 in a few months' time by the time I post this episode, which is in the middle of 2024 when I'm recording it. And reach out if you're new to the show. Of course, go back and check out the first 4 seasons. We have almost, I think, 30 some odd episodes, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more, don't quote me on it. And check out the prior episodes if you're new, or if you've missed any episodes, or if you want to refresh any episodes. And reach out if you have any questions, or if you want to get involved, looking for guests for future episodes, or if you want to strike up a conversation about spotlighting your work, you feel like you'd be a good fit for the show in terms of this new way of leading, this ascending leadership, as I call it. And I'm all about inspiration and bringing together a collective effort, because truly together we're rising. This is not an individual mission. This is a collective mission. And as many of you may know, I took a vow. I do this full time, and I truly am on a mission to activate leaders around the world to really understand their awakening, integrate deeper than they ever have, and bring forward more soul and lead with their spirituality and with their spiritual gifts. So this mission of mine, I invite you into it. I invite you to join me. If you like this episode, if you like this show, please do like it, comment. It helps with the algorithm and with getting the message out there so that more and more leaders can see these vital skills, see these vital teachings, and see the, let's say, the lessons and the opportunities they have wherever they're at on their journey. And certainly do share the episode, send it out to your community. And as I said, if you want to reach out to collaborate, either to be on the show, or if you have any questions about the show, you can find my contact information on my YouTube channel. And so, as always, I love to tell you all that we'll see you soon. It may be a few months when you watch this episode before the next season hits, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all then. If you want to be on the show, reach out to me. If you have somebody you have in mind, please put me in touch with them, and please do support this mission. It's a very vital time. Embodiment, this theme of today's episode, is very important. It helped me personally, as I've shared in so many ways, and all of the episodes are really brought forth with my love, with the intention that they support you, they inspire you, and they empower and encourage you leaders around the world, so each of you can be the ascending leader you came here to be. I'm Haas Sadeghi. Thank you again for joining us on the Vulnerable Power Show. We'll see you next season. Much love and blessings. And here's to living a more embodied and aware, intentional, and truly fulfilled life.